possible in no small part thanks to our wonderful channel member community here on YouTube. So big thanks to folks like Cumulus Granatus, Space Coast Rocket Launches Florida, Bonnie Long, Mark P., and many others. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop, which is shop.spaceflightnow.com, access to member-only videos here on YouTube, access to our members-only Discord server, and the ability to watch all of our live launch liftoff moments from here in Florida in 4K. Want to welcome in our newest channel member, Shattered491, joining us with membership at the Pad Leader level. Welcome aboard, Shattered. We're glad to have you with us. Shattered491, joining us with membership at the Pad Leader level. Welcome aboard, Shattered. We're glad to have you with us. That's a little bit of housekeeping. If you have a comment or question about this mission or other goings on in the realm of space or spaceflight, or want to follow the lead of Norm Harding and just offer a little bit of support for what we do here at the channel, follow the lead of Norm by using the YouTube Super Chat feature. Not only will he be giving us some interesting things to talk about as we cruise on through the count, she'll also be supporting what we do here at Spaceflight Now, and that, my friends, is always greatly appreciated. So thanks to Norm for the $2 Super Chat. And as we're all settling in, I want to thank the team and introduce them as we're getting going here. Our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, is running the technical operations of the broadcast today alongside photographer John Pisani. Adam Bernstein out and about making sure all the cameras. Our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, is running the technical operations of the broadcast today alongside photographer John Pisani. Adam Bernstein out and about making sure all the cameras are nice and in sharp focus, getting ready to track the Falcon 9 rocket as it makes its ascent as well. John will also be out tracking the Falcon 9 rocket once it makes its ascent. Michael's shooting off site today. If you're following our folks on X, fabulous. If not, now's a great time to do so. You can find them with their handles that you see here on your screen. Michael is at MD Kane Jr. John is at John Pisani Photo, and Adam is at A Burn NYC. While you're there, be sure to follow Spaceflight Now simply at Spaceflight Now. You can also find us on Threads, Blue Sky, and Facebook. Pisani Photo, and Adam is at A Burn NYC. While you're there, be sure to follow Spaceflight Now simply at Spaceflight Now. You can also find us on Threads, Blue Sky, and Facebook. Just about 48 and a half minutes on the clock right now. You may have seen occasionally a little bit of venting from the strong back. Of course, we are quite a ways away from the big vent that's more than 20 minutes, nearly half an hour from now. It has been typical to see a little bit of venting from the strong back in the pocket of time between about an hour out to right about now is when it starts to fizzle out. But if you do see a little bit of spurts of venting, that is typical for Pad 39A. Of course, as we are getting progressively closer to the launch of the Artemis 2 mission, teams are continuing to work towards some of the final testing milestones inside the Vehicle Assembly Building, or the VAB. So, throughout the course of our coverage here this morning, you may hear loudspeaker announcements like the one that just went out notifying personnel to get off one of the particular platforms. I couldn't quite tell which one that they were referring to. Speaking of the Artemis 2 mission, of course, when you're flying to the moon, it's all about the timing, right? Well, we have a new video up on the channel if you haven't had a chance to watch it after this broadcast is done, or if you want to open it up in a separate tab as you're having this on in the background, you can check out our conversation with some of the folks whose job it is to figure out the timing of the launch windows for Artemis 2 and the various factors that go into making all that come together, and why there's just a finite amount of opportunities in any given month in order to be able to fly to the moon. It's a fascinating conversation. Again, that's up on the YouTube channel right now for your viewing pleasure. Time currently T minus 43 minutes, 18 seconds and counting. The Falcon 9 first stage booster that is flying today has the tail number of B1094 in the SpaceX fleet. It will be making its sixth trip to space and back when it launches, so not quite enough to earn it a spot on our Falcon 9 frequent flyers list. Here's where things currently stand. Worth noting for the launch yet to come from over in Vandenberg, that mission, the Starlink 15-13, will feature the flight of number 3 on this list, B1063, making it the third booster that SpaceX has notched 30 flights with. The company is working towards certifying its first stage booster for up to 40 flights. Just under 42 minutes to go, and less than 4 minutes now to the nominal point when the SpaceX launch director will make the call, confirming that they are ready to proceed to the start of prop load. SpaceX does their readiness poll electronically, so if they are in a good position to do so, this can come a little bit earlier. Let's go ahead and talk about the countdown timeline for today. Steps that SpaceX will be passing through in order to fly their Falcon 9 rocket from Launch Complex 39A. Once the go-ahead for prop load is issued, fueling will start at T-minus 35 minutes with the loading of RP-1, which is a rocket-grade kerosene. That'll happen on board the rocket's first and second stages. At the same time, liquid oxygen will begin to flow on board the rocket's booster. Half an hour before takeoff, SpaceX will load cryogenic helium onto the pressure vessels for the Falcon 9's first stage, and will do the same on the second stage a few minutes after that. The helium is important because it's used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. T-minus 23 minutes is when second stage RP-1 loading wraps up. Then at T-minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds is the start of the strong back chill down. SpaceX will be thermally conditioning the feed line during flight. T-minus 23 minutes is when second stage RP-1 loading wraps up. Then at T-minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds is the start of the strong back chill down. SpaceX will be thermally conditioning the feed lines there at the pad at this point in the count. We'll see this visually as the big vent in here at pad 39A that begins at about T-minus 20 minutes and 30 seconds. This venting lasts roughly 4 minutes in duration, tapering off and setting the stage for liquid oxygen to start flowing on board the rocket's upper stage at T-minus 16 minutes. Moving right along, 7 minutes out is the chill down of the 9 Merlin engines. SpaceX will flow a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps, helping to protect those engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during startup. About 6 minutes before flight, the first stage kerosene tank is full. Then at T-minus 4.5 minutes, we'll see the retraction of the strong back. The clamp arms just beneath the payload fairings will open up, and then the strong back, otherwise referred to as the transporter erector, or the TE, that will recline a few degrees away from the valve stage kerosene tank is full. Then at T-minus 4.5 minutes, we'll see the retraction of the strong back. The clamp arms just beneath the payload fairings will open up, and then the strong back, otherwise referred to as the transporter erector, or the TE, that will recline a few degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket, and it will stay in that position until liftoff. Then at that point, it'll pull back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of this Falcon 9. 3 minutes before takeoff, the first stage liquid oxygen tank should be full. Same will be true on the second stage about a minute after that. At that point, the Falcon 9 rocket is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. In the final 60 seconds, as we hear the call that the Falcon 9 has entered into its automated startup, control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers, and at the same time, the propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. SpaceX launch director will confirm they are go for launch. T-minus 45 seconds. The engine ignition sequence kicks off at T-minus 3 seconds. And if all 9 Merlin engines are healthy and ignite as expected, command will be given for the hold down clamps to release the Falcon 9 rocket for a T0 liftoff. This morning, looking for that departure at 8:42 a.m. Eastern, 13:42 UTC, or just a hair under 38 minutes from now. Coming up on T-minus 37 minutes in the count. Of course, our standard policy here for the channel is to not delve into topics of overt politics or religion. We'll hold to the second of that, but just to give you a bit more on the landscape happening today. Up on Capitol Hill, the U.S. Senate is poised to vote on the nomination of Jared Isaacman for the position of NASA Administrator. According to one of our reporting colleagues, Marcia Smith, who's over at Space Policy Online, great publication if you're not already reading that. If you really want to delve into all things space politics and policy, that's a great place to turn to. Isaacman's nomination is scheduled for consideration and discussion by the full Senate after the Senate votes on the National Defense Authorization Act, or the NDAA, which is scheduled for around 11:30. So after having been voted favorably out of committee, Isaacman's nomination one step closer to being actualized, and NASA finally getting a 15th Senate-confirmed administrator. As we're coming up on the start of fueling, we will be watching for the telltale signs of prop load. In the meantime, so you've got Atlantic Storms Tracker joining us from Trinidad and Tobago. Cumulus is down in the Caribbean. Let us know where you're watching from today. Neglected to mention earlier that we are joined today by our friends Chuck and Jen Briggs with C&J Images, whose camera view you just saw. We'll be joined a little bit later in the broadcast by Pete Karstens with Max Q Productions. Looks like we've got folks from here in Florida, the Villages represented, New Smyrna, Los Angeles, California, Northern Virginia. Always wonderful to see where our global audience is checking in from. Less than 33 and a half minutes remaining on the clock. What we're watching for at this juncture is evidence of a frost line beginning to form at the base of the rocket. Less than 33 and a half minutes remaining on the clock. What we're watching for at this juncture is evidence of a frost line beginning to form at the base of the rocket. Should be able to see some vapor in that region as well as the super cold densified liquid oxygen flows on board at the first stage. And we are starting to see some vapor now near where the strong back tapers in. If you can make out the lettering of SpaceX, it's just beneath the X in SpaceX where that vapor is really starting to become much more pronounced. Good visual indication that SpaceX is fueling its Falcon 9 rocket at this point in time and locking into the current T0 of 8:42 a.m. Eastern, 13:42 UTC for our friends around the world. As a reminder, once SpaceX has begun the fueling process, they no longer have the ability to hold the countdown. So if there are any issues between now and the planned T0, whether they be from a weather perspective or a ground or rocket issue, that would be tantamount to a scrub. But so far, things seem to be progressing well this morning, at least from the rocket's perspective. For those of you just joining the broadcast, you're watching Spaceflight Now's live coverage of the Starlink 6-99 mission from NASA's Kennedy Space Center. We're just about T-minus 27 minutes before liftoff, and as you can see, fuel loading is well underway as SpaceX loading liquid oxygen on board the rocket's booster, as well as RP-1, a rocket-grade kerosene on board the first and second stages. Starting to see a bit more breakup in the clouds as well, which hopefully will bode well for those hoping to catch a glimpse of this rocket as it flies on a southeasterly trajectory from the pad here at Launch Complex 39A. Certainly appreciate the more than 900 of you who are watching along with us live this morning. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking that like button and sharing the stream, allowing some more folks into this live launch coverage. Having mentioned in passing the trajectory for this mission, let's go ahead and talk about that a little bit more explicitly. Taking a look at a Google Earth overview of LC-39A. At 8:42 a.m. Eastern, when the rocket lifts off, it will fly on that southeasterly trajectory, heading away from Florida's Space Coast. Less than 3 minutes into the mission, the Falcon 9 first stage booster with the tail number B1094 will separate from the second stage and begin its path towards the drone ship called Just Read the Instructions, positioned out in the Atlantic. Again, SpaceX is working to certify its boosters for up to 40 flights apiece. Same is true with its payload fairings, which will be splashing down in the waters of the Atlantic a little bit further downrange from where the booster lands on the drone ship. It'll be brought aboard a recovery vessel and then taken back through Port Canaveral, where it will head on to the Hangar X site, then on to certification, recertification for future flights. Coming up on T minus 22 minutes in the count. Given that this is a fairly newish booster in the SpaceX fleet, it doesn't have a very extensive flight history, but the missions that it has flown are quite notable. So before the big vent, or got about a minute remaining before the big vent, maybe not enough time to talk about the booster history. So I'll leave you with that tease and we'll talk about that on the other side of the vent. Taking a quick peek at our live chat, one of our channel members, Rebecca Trokey, saying, "Good morning, everyone. Looking forward to seeing a jellyfish. Want to temper expectations on that, just given the lighting at this point in the morning and the amount of cloud cover. I'm highly skeptical that we would see much of a jellyfish this morning." And there you see the start of the big vent. SpaceX is thermally conditioning the feed lines there at the pad. This venting will last about 4 minutes in duration, setting the stage for second stage liquid oxygen load to start. coming upon the end of the big vent here in the next few seconds. And with the big vent concluded, second stage LOX load can now proceed. Just under 16 minutes to go now. Taking a look back at our live chat. I want to thank Parker Isaacson for the $5 super chat. One of our wonderful channel members who says, off early tonight for the launch due to it being at our pad. Still hammering down on the Starship Tower. And yes, for those wanting to see the continued progress of the development of said Starship Tower at Launch Complex 39A, you can tune in basically anytime, 24/7, to our stream Launchpad Live. Got one of our cameras that's usually pointed right at the tower. Of course, given that this is a launch from 39A, we're using our resources for that camera to focus on the launch itself, but we'll reorient things after liftoff. Mentioned the booster history for this Falcon 9 first stage before the big vent, so let's go ahead and mentioned the booster history for this Falcon 9 first stage before the big vent, so let's go ahead and close the loop on that. Talking a little bit about the flights that B1094 has accomplished so far. Its flying days began on April 29th with the launch of the Starlink 12-10 mission. That was followed on June 25th by the flight of AX4, the most recent private astronaut mission to the International Space Station, launching aboard SpaceX's newest and the planned final Crew Dragon vehicle that the company plans to build, which was named Grace by the crew of AX4. Another Dragon mission was up next for this booster. This time it was the Crew 11 mission to the International Space Station, launching on Dragon Endeavour on August 1st. Another space station bound flight came on September 14th, the launch of Northrop Grumman's Cygnus spacecraft on the NG-23 mission. And most recently, another batch of Starlink satellites. Another space station bound flight came on September 14th, the launch of Northrop Grumman's Cygnus spacecraft on the NG-23 mission. And most recently, another batch of Starlink satellites, 6-81 on November 6th, which brings up today Starlink 6-99, with this not quite being the fastest turnaround time for the booster, given this mission has been pushed to the right a few times. Coming up on T minus 11 minutes in the count. Of course, we'll have a lot of great vantage points to share with you live in the moment when this rocket does lift off at 8:42 a.m. Eastern. Of course, it's impossible to show you everything all at once, so be sure to stick around for after the booster landing. We'll have our roundup of launch replays ready for you. T minus 9 minutes, 30 seconds, and counting. Talking about the payload that's on board this Falcon 9 rocket this morning. It's a batch of 29 Starlink V2 Mini optimized satellites. Taking a look at some of the manufacturing process that happens up in Redmond, Washington, which is near Seattle. This mission set to be the 121st launch of Starlink satellites so far in 2025. The V2 Mini optimized satellites are considerably lighter than their predecessor Starlink V2 Minis, clocking in at about 1,267 pounds or 575 kilograms. Previous V2 Minis were a little more than 1,700 pounds or roughly 800 kilograms in mass. With their solar panels unfurled, these satellites have a wingspan of about 100 feet or 30 meters. As mentioned, you're watching the manufacturing process in part that happens up in SpaceX facilities in Redmond, Washington. Unfurled, these satellites have a wingspan of about 100 feet or 30 meters. As mentioned, you're watching the manufacturing process in part that happens up in SpaceX facilities in Redmond, Washington. These satellites will be deployed to an altitude of 168 miles or 271 kilometers at a 43-degree inclination. These are the Argon Hall effect thrusters they use for on-orbit maneuvering. Just under 7 minutes to go now. At this point, SpaceX is flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps of the 9 Merlin 1D engines at the base of the booster, and that's in order to protect them from thermal shock and damage at startup. Coming up in now less than 30 seconds, the first stage RP-1 tank should be full. Just under 5 minutes remaining.
Strong back, retract. Strong back, retract.
Now getting pad level video from SpaceX as well as mission audio, though it's coming through a little bit low. We're working to boost that for you. As you can see, the clamp arms just beneath the payload fairings have opened up. Looks like those fairings have seen quite a bit of life. Again, SpaceX is working to certify its fairing halves for up to 40 flights each. The company doesn't often comment, though, on the flights of the payload fairings unless it's for a customer, typically. We don't always get a good, clear view of the fairing numbers, so it's a little bit trickier to track the payload fairings for SpaceX versus the flights of the payload fairings unless it's for a customer, typically. We don't always get a good, clear view of the fairing numbers, so it's a little bit trickier to track the payload fairings for SpaceX versus the boosters. For example, in this camera view, it's certainly close enough to the boost or to the fairing halves that we should be able to see the numbers, but they're
Stage 1 LOX load is complete.
Out of frame. Good call there on stage 1 LOX load. We should hear a similar call regarding the second stage around T-minus 2 minutes.
Stage 2, LOX load complete.
With that call, the Falcon 9 rocket is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. You're seeing the ground gas closeouts now, the release of the remaining LOX from the feed lines of the pad.
Ground gas closeouts.
Just under 1 minute.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
With the call, we're just waiting the SpaceX launch director to confirm that they are in fact go for launch.
LD, go for launch.
And with that confirmation, we are now approaching the final 30 seconds before liftoff of this Falcon 9. "15 seconds. And here we go. In 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition and liftoff. Liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket on the Starlink 6-99 mission. The Falcon 9 has cleared the tower. Now a little more than a minute to flight, pass through max Q, point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle.
MVAC chill.
That call, SpaceX now thermally conditioning the Merlin vacuum engine on the rocket's upper stage. SpaceX is coming up to a few events in fairly rapid succession. We'll see first stage main engine cutoff, or MECO, at about T plus 2 minutes and 24 seconds. That'll be followed by stage separation, and then the ignition of that Merlin vacuum engine. Payload fairings will jettison at around the 3-minute mark. Engine cutoff, or MECO, at about T plus 2 minutes and 24 seconds. That'll be followed by stage separation, and then the ignition of that Merlin vacuum engine. Payload fairings will jettison at around the 3-minute mark. About 10 seconds to MECO. And Miko. Stage separation.
Stage separation confirmed.
And back ignition. There go the payload fairings.
Fairing separation confirmed.
A nice view of the 29 Starlink satellites there in the lower right-hand corner. Those fairing halves will be recovered a little bit further downrange from where the booster lands on the drone ship called Just Read the Instructions. You can see all the clouds beneath the Falcon 9 first and second stages there from those onboard cameras. Pete's still tracking the booster as you're occasionally seeing the puffs of the cold gas thrusters through the clouds. If we're lucky, we may be able to see the start of the 3-engine entry burn through Pete's tracking camera, but tracking, of course, is a bit difficult with the clouds today, but Pete doing a stellar job of keeping that booster in sight. Well done to both Adam, John, and Chuck and Jen for great tracking work as well. A little more than 4.5 minutes into this flight so far. Booster currently at an altitude of 110 kilometers and descending. Upper stage continuing to climb. 142 kilometers in altitude, a little more than 11,000 kilometers per hour. A little more than 5 minutes into the flight. Coming up next is that entry burn, which will use 3 out of the 9 Merlin engines to begin to greatly slow the booster down. That's set to begin at about T plus 6 minutes and 7 seconds. That burn lasts less than 30 seconds in duration.
Stage 1 FTS is saved.
Entry burn should be starting right about now in real time.
Stage 1, entry burn startup. Stage 1, entry burn shutdown.
With the conclusion of that entry burn, SpaceX now turns next to the start of the single engine landing burn, which will take
Stage 2
booster
FTS is
1094 all the way down to the drone ship. Just read the instructions. A good landing today would represent the 146th such landing on the drone ship. and the 552nd booster landing for SpaceX to date.
Stage 1 transonic.
And as a reminder, don't go anywhere. Once the booster does land, we've got our launch replays in preparation for you. We'll go around the horn, show you all the various camera views that we had to capture launch.
Stage 2 terminal guidance.
Stage 1 landing burn. Stage 1 landing leg deploy. Stage 1 landing confirmed.
And a good touchdown for B-1094, completing its 6th flight.
MVAC shutdown.
Nominal orbit insertion.
And with confirmation of a nominal parking orbit achieved, at this point, the upper stage will continue to coast until T plus 53 minutes, 49 seconds.
Orbit insertion.
And with confirmation of a nominal parking orbit achieved, at this point, the upper stage will continue to coast until T plus 53 minutes, 49 seconds. There will be a brief 2-second burn on the upper stage engine to circularize its orbit. And then the Starlink satellites will be deployed at T plus 1 hour, 4 minutes, and 56 seconds post liftoff. SpaceX will confirm a good deployment shortly thereafter on their social channels. As a reminder, again, we've got those launch replays that are in work as we speak. We're going to go ahead and turn to our mission stats next in the interim. But before we hit that, I want to thank a couple folks for their support today. Thanks to one of our channel members, friend of the channel, Charles Boyer, with talk of Titusville, the $20 super chat. Thank you, Charles, who says, happy holidays to the entire Spaceflight Now team. Happy holidays to you, too. Friend of the channel, Charles Boyer, with talk of Titusville, the $20 super chat. Thank you, Charles, who says, happy holidays to the entire Spaceflight Now team. Happy holidays to you, too. Also want to thank another channel member, Chuck Close, for a very generous $25 super chat. Thank you, Chuck. Really appreciate the support this morning. And want to welcome in new channel member, Sheldon Rigsby, joining us with membership at the pad leader level. Welcome aboard, Sheldon. We're glad to have you with us. As we ready those replays, let's turn now to the mission stats for this particular flight.